Good evening. It's 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm Charles Schultz, and this is the Randomizer for March 14th, Monday, 2022. Some people refer to this date, 3/14, as being Pi Day, so why not? I'll give them the nod. Have a little mathematical fun while you're at it. So it's Pi Day today, and our subject tonight is going to be a little unconventional. Flat winding. Wow. Well, a flat winding, what is that and why is it important? We're going to get into all of that very shortly here. So I'm going to encourage everybody to join us every weeknight at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the Randomizer. Come on in live, ask your questions, get some answers, make some suggestions. It'll be a lot of fun. We always have interesting technical material to start a nice conversation about every weeknight at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard. We are starting a new series of lessons very shortly. I'll post the schedule online. Go to the site, schultzlaboratories.com or universesciencecenter.com. Walk around in our galleries and explore some of our interactive exhibits. Become a member, join, sign up, have fun with it. Help us expand and bring this educational virtual world to everybody on earth. It'll be a lot of fun, and it certainly doesn't hurt to have a lot of smarter, educated people around you. I think society would be better as a whole if everybody had at least a few months of good, hard, hands-on technical experience of some sort. It's not going to learn itself. You got to go out there and do it for it. So tonight's term, flat winding, what's it all about? Many people are familiar with the fact that nearly everything in our world depends on electric motors and transformers. Transformers to deliver the electrical power through the system, electric motors to make things move and happen. I can't think of many machines that don't have transformer windings or motor windings in them, and it's because, let's face it, just sheer guts power from electrical current can move a lot of things. It makes everything in industry run. It makes all the machines work. And so one of the easiest and most direct tasks for any supply of electric current is to make something move and to do it uniformly and consistently. So electric motors depend greatly on the windings, the coils that produce the opposing magnetic fields inside them that make them spin around. And it's really pretty simple. The winding has a magnetic force around it when there's a current flowing through the winding. And if you have a couple of windings next to each other and there's current flowing through them, they're going to either attract or repel. Well, with some clever design and switching, you can actually make those windings attract and repel each other in succession so they spin, and they'll spin endlessly as long as there's current applied. So, all of that being said, that's all well and good. There is an issue, and that is, in many cases, the motor must be small and light, and we have increased the density of magnetic fields immensely in the last couple of decades or so by going to what are referred to as rare earth magnets. And yes, that makes a huge difference in the efficiency and power of a compact electric motor. And I'll tell you another thing. The little earphones we have today that fit right inside the ear, those things are only possible because we have super magnets, rare earth magnets within them. And so far, so good. We know that by making more powerful magnets, we can make the motors more compact and more energy dense and more efficient. But the other side of the coin is the fact that the windings themselves have a couple of flaws that can be rectified pretty easily. Now, imagine you've wound a whole bunch of wire up into a coil. Well, there's one thing you're going to notice pretty quickly, and that is there's only so much copper you can put into a coil when you wind it up. And that's because the cross-section, the shape of the wire itself, is round, it's circular. And if you were to take a nickel and lay it on a sheet of paper and take a pencil and trace around the nickel and make a circle, and then you do a few more and you pack them as closely together as you can, you end up with a little series of basically circles packed in hexagons, like a honeycomb. And I've taken the liberty of filling in the spaces between the circles. You'll soon notice that they don't fill all the space. The dark area shows where there's no copper. What are we going to do about that? You see, the density of the magnetic field depends on the presence of copper, because copper is what conducts the current and therefore creates the magnetic field. If you have zones where there's no copper, you're not making field there. How do you get around that? Well, it's actually pretty simple. If instead of using round wire, you used rectangular cross-section wire, and you made flat windings, they would pack more effectively, and you could cram just a little bit more copper into those windings and get just a little bit more field strength, and it adds up, and you get a denser field, and therefore a more powerful and more efficient coil. Since the coil is fundamental to making your transformers and making your motor windings, this is a very positive thing. There's actually a fellow who did some research in this, flat windings with flat wire and the bobbins to hold the wire that was being wound up. And his name was Richard Sedgwick, yeah, there it is, Richard Sedgwick, and he had a U.S. patent issued, 4859890, issued in 1989 in August, for making this minor change, which has a huge effect, believe it or not, on inductors, transformers, and motors. So you can have a winding with flat windings, and it will have up to 40% less area involved to get a specific field density. That's significant. So you can imagine, just by changing the shape of your wire, you end up with a much more effective and efficient product. That's kind of interesting, and you wonder how many things in our lives could undergo just such a minor change and get better. Well, I know that if you look at some of the motors in floppy drives, well, they don't have those much anymore, but in CD-ROM drives and any sorts of the interfaces that plug into the computer that spin media, like DVD players, that sort of thing, they're all using flat coils and flat windings put right on the circuit boards instead of an individual motor in many cases. So here's another advantage of using flat windings. You literally can print the motor on a circuit board with very little effort in some cases. And even if you can't print the whole winding, you can put very small, low-profile flat windings epoxied right onto the circuit board, and the circuit board itself becomes a part of the motor. That's pretty amazing. We're getting to the stage now, with miniaturization proceeding as it is toward nanotechnology, that the smaller those windings can be, the smaller everything can be, the more effective it will be, the less power it consumes, and the more function you get in a smaller volume. And that really is the target. For years, we've been making smaller and smaller microchips, smaller gates, smaller transistors, and we're down to the stage now. We're about scraping the size of atoms on many of the semiconductors we make right now. People literally are having to chill some of them so that atomic noise from atoms vibrating does not interfere with the actions of the semiconductors. Many years ago, when they were making dynamic memory chips, and I was in the industry at the time, one of the problems they had was when they packaged them in military packages, which are made of ceramic to metal, not plastic. When they packaged them in ceramic packages, the error rates for the memory cells went way up. And people were scratching their heads like, what the heck is wrong with this? We put them in plastic, they work fine, but they don't have survivability across the range of temperatures and environments that a ceramic case would have. But when we put them in the ceramic cases, the error rates for the memories go through the roof. The problem was simple. Ceramic is made of materials mined out of the ground, and many of the minerals used to make ceramics have just a trace of natural radioactive elements in them, and the radioactive decay of the elements in the ceramic case was causing errors by discharging the bits in the stored memories. So the dynamic RAMs were unreliable when they made them with military-grade cases. What an amazing discovery. Well, one of the things they did is they passivated the layers and they put a coating on the surface of the chip to reduce the effect of incident radiation particles. And many of them were just photons or electrons. And it doesn't take much to stop beta radiation, which is electron or positron radiation coming off of a chip. So there were ways of passivating this problem and getting around it, and they did solve that. But now, since the memory cells are so much smaller, just like these windings are smaller, they became more susceptible to the errors again. At this point, the reason we use superconducting chilled computers for quantum mechanical work is because atomic noise, thermal noise itself, will destroy the signal, and you have to isolate it and get rid of it. So I'm not saying that that's going to be a problem with these windings, but with flat windings you can get a more robust magnetic field. But the smaller you make it, the problem now is the insulation thickness becomes very significant. At some point, the wire is so small that the insulation is as large as the conductor, just to make sure that it doesn't short out. So, for very small things like that, they're going now to electrostatic motors, which don't use windings in that manner. They literally use the stiction forces between one capacitor plate and another with a charge. So this becomes similar to the stiction of molecules to surfaces, something called van der Waals forces. Nevertheless, that's a little bit off topic, but the fact is flat windings have allowed us to make more dense, more compact, and more effective motors, transformers, and inductor systems. And we can expect that with some changes in some of the new alloys they're working on and the new insulators, this will proceed until they just can't jam any more in there. For now, we're in a pretty good state because most of the motors in the real world are large enough you can pick them up, even though some of them are small enough to use tweezers. But we still have not reached a point in motors in the real world where we have to make them much smaller. For things smaller than that, we use different technologies, not magnetic fields. So, if anybody has any questions about flat windings, the tools used to make them, and by the way, you can go online and look up a lot of the patent information and other stuff, and some of the things that you'll discover will be fascinating, and maybe they'll give you some ideas. And I would say that one of the advantages to having a little space between the wiring is you sometimes get better cooling. In this case, they're designing systems to work pretty much at their limits as it stands, and you couldn't pack it much more densely without some trouble. Now, one other thing that comes to mind, because of thermal expansion and contraction, there are actually new alloys that are made of materials that shrink when heated and some expand when heated, and an alloy of the two seems to reach a happy medium sometimes. Some materials, like Monel, the metal alloy used to make many coins, have some very stable properties over a wide range of temperatures. For high altitude vehicles, things that travel in space, satellites, believe it or not, there's a limit to how high an altitude many microchips will take, because of the simple fact that heat being radiated from the case has to be carried away by atmosphere. If there's not some gas cooling of some sort, the chips will eventually blow up or burn up. So in satellites, they have specific fluid cooling or heat fins laminated in there that conduct the heat away. Flat windings actually work very well in these circumstances because they can be fit right up against a heatsink fin and remain cooled properly, even in space flight conditions. So a number of the advantages that we gain from using flat windings. Well, I'm going to quickly walk through the advertisement here. Please go to SchultzLaboratories.com or UniverseScienceCenter.com, sign up for our regular membership, and support the growth of our galleries and material. And as I mentioned previously, if you are an educator, an artist, someone who simply wants to teach their skills, contact us. We can set you up with a virtual world gallery that will support your teaching to any number of students, and you can reach students worldwide. If you're teaching art, how to cut hair, how to cook food, how to solder, doesn't matter. If you want your own classroom in our virtual world, it's very easy to do. So do contact us, and we'll make arrangements with you. Meanwhile, I don't see any questions on the floor. We are open for questions, but I'm going to read a funny verse that I saw, and it just made people think. It made me think. It says, and this is from Genesis 3:21, and also for Adam and his wife, the Lord God made tunics of skin and clothed them. Well, I know that's not going to leave some people very happy, but the first clothing was literally made by God, and it was made of skins. Um, I think leather and fur might have been the only game in town back then if you didn't want to wear leaves. That being said, since there are no questions, I hope you've had an entertaining talk here. I know I always enjoy doing these, and we'll have another randomizer with a new random subject for you tomorrow at 6 p.m. And everybody have a wonderful evening. Thank you for joining me. And as I always say, make the world a better place. Thank you very much. I'm Charles Schultz. Have a great evening.